You would recognize their voice anywhere. That used to be enough. For your whole life it was proof. It quietly stopped being proof and nobody announced it. Today we break down why recognition is no longer evidence and what replaces it. Start with how humans have always verified each other. Not with documents, with familiarity. You know a voice, a face, a way of phrasing something, a small habit of speech. That recognition happens instantly and below thinking, and it has been reliable for as long as there have been people. It was reliable for one reason only. Producing a convincing imitation was hard, and hard things are rare. There is a single rule at the end of this that closes the whole problem. We will get there. Here is what changed, and it is not really a story about technology. It is a story about cost. Anything that used to be difficult and is now easy stops working as a filter. A signature was meaningful when forging one took skill. A seal was meaningful when carving one took a craftsman. Familiarity was meaningful for exactly the same reason, and the reason has now moved. Which means the thing your instincts are doing is no longer measuring what they think. Your recognition is still accurate. It is correctly detecting a match. What it cannot do is tell you where the match came from. And that gap between accuracy and meaning is the entire vulnerability. Now there is an objection worth taking seriously. People have always been able to lie on a phone. Impersonation is not new, and pretending to be somebody is one of the oldest tricks there is. That is true. What is new is that it no longer requires knowing the person. Previously, imitating someone convincingly required access to them. Now the resemblance can be assembled from material that is simply lying around in public. So the pool of people who could plausibly be impersonated used to be small. It is no longer small. Now here is the reversal, and it is the useful part. The response is not to get better at detecting fakes. You will lose that. Detection is a skill that must improve continuously, against something that improves faster and never gets tired. Trying to listen harder is the wrong move, because it keeps the decision inside the channel where you are already being played. The correct response is to stop using recognition as evidence at all. If this is landing, tap subscribe so you do not miss the next one. The rule is this: verification has to happen on a different channel from the request. If a call asks for something, you hang up and reach the person the way you normally reach them. Not by any number you were just given. Not by replying to the message. Through the route you already had before today. That single move defeats the entire category, and it does not require you to judge whether anything sounded right. It works precisely because it does not depend on your judgment. Notice what that rule protects you from, because the coverage is wider than it first appears. It does not matter how good the imitation was. It does not matter that details were correct, that the manner was right, that the emotion was convincing. None of that has to be assessed because the check happens somewhere the imitation cannot follow. That is what makes it a rule rather than a tip. A tip helps you win a judgment call. A rule removes the judgment call. There is a specific pressure that appears in almost every version of this, and it exists to break that rule. You will be told not to hang up. There will be a reason. The line will drop. There is no time. Somebody will be embarrassed. It has to be handled now, quietly. That instruction is the tell, and it is a better tell than anything in the audio. Because a real person in a real emergency has never in history been harmed by you calling them straight back. There is a second pattern worth naming because it works on the most careful people. The request will be small and the emotion will be large. Distress does something specific to decision making. It narrows attention onto the person in front of you and away from process. Every safeguard you have is a process, and process is exactly what urgency dissolves. So the effective defense is not to be calmer under pressure. It is to have decided in advance what you will do, so that the decision does not have to be made while you are upset. There is one more thing that makes this harder than it should be, and it is worth saying out loud. Hanging up on someone who might really be them feels unbearable. That feeling is the mechanism. It is not a side effect. And the only way through it is to agree beforehand with the people who matter to you that this is what you will both do. A rule you have discussed with someone is not rude. It is a shared arrangement, and it takes about a minute to set up. There is a related version that does not involve anyone you know, and it is worth separating out. Sometimes the familiar thing is not a person but an institution. A voice with the right manner, the right terminology, the right background noise of an office. Institutional familiarity is even weaker as evidence than personal familiarity, because you were never familiar with an individual in the first place. You were familiar with a style, and a style is the easiest thing in the world to reproduce. There is also a question people ask that has a disappointing answer. Everybody wants a code word. An agreed phrase known only to the family that proves who is speaking. It is better than nothing and it is worth having, but it fails in exactly the moment it is needed, because a distressed person under pressure forgets it and a calm imposter never does. The callback works when the code word does not, because it does not have to be remembered at all. It is worth being honest about the limits here. None of this makes you unreachable, and none of it means treating people with suspicion. The overwhelming majority of calls you receive are exactly who they say they are. The point is not to doubt everyone. It is that the cost of the check is almost nothing, and the cost of skipping it is not symmetrical. You spend 1 minute to be wrong, or you spend everything to be right once. Once you see this, a few things stop being confusing. Why the request is always time-bound. Why you are steered away from the routes you already know. Why the story is always slightly embarrassing so that involving anyone else feels like a betrayal. Why it is almost never a stranger and almost always somebody your instincts want to help. Every one of those is aimed at the same thing, not your money, your second channel. So, practically, it is 2 conversations and 1 habit. Agree with the people closest to you that any urgent request gets called back, on the number you already have, no exceptions and no offense taken. Do the same thing for anything that claims to be an organization you deal with. Leave the conversation, arrive by your own route. And treat any pressure not to do that as the single most informative thing said during the call. Because the request to stay on the line is the only part of the performance that cannot be faked away. Now back to the first question. Why is the voice on the phone not who you think? Because recognition was never proof of identity. It was proof that imitation was expensive. The expense went away and the proof went with it, and nobody sent a notice. If this was useful, subscribe and let us keep going. Have you agreed a callback rule with the people who matter to you? Tell me in the comments. Understand money and you will see the world. The quiet part.